Yeah. There we go. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Joe Marion here again from ASCDI. Our next session is going to feature two sides of the same circular coin. And we have TES with us today, and we have Procurri. Guys, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you. Stephen, let me start with you and take the ball, please.
Yes, sure, Joe. Thanks very much. Hi, I'm Steve Graham. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of TES's business in Europe, overseeing 16 processing facilities across the UK, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and the Nordics. For those who are not aware, TES was established in 2005 and has evolved to become a global leader in lifecycle management services. Headquartered in Singapore, we've grown to over 2,000 employees working across Asia, Europe, and the US, with a services portfolio including environmentally compliant recycling, ITAR, including refurbishment, repair, resale, managed deployment, on-site data sanitization, and parts harvesting. We very much close the loop, enabling our customers to transition to the circular economy by extending the life of assets with reuse and repair programs, and where it's not possible, ensuring that those materials are recovered, recycled, and fed back into the raw material markets. Sustainability is our priority and TES's core business strategy. Over to you, Matt.
Cheers, Steve. So I'm Matt Jordan. I head up the Lifecycle services, hardware and distribution platforms for Procurri. For those that aren't aware, Procurri was probably a buy and build dating back some sort of 5 or 6 years, and we have ended up with offices and infrastructure spanning the EMEAs, Americas, and APAC region as well. We tend to dovetail into an awful lot of where TES's activities are, where we tend to work on hardware specs, hardware configuration, looking after the third-party maintenance solutions of hardware assets throughout its life cycle, and then we pick in at the ITAR play when product is no longer desired or becomes end of life within that organization, being able to either harvest and reinsert parts of it back into the maintenance spares pool, or find a resale market and redeploy it back into the marketplace. So I guess just staging what we're looking to talk about today or to discuss today, sustainability, and the world is going green. I think that's to a large degree a given. We're all seeing it, and actually if you have any view of TV and watching adverts, the sustainability messages coming hard and fast from the majority of European and probably global corporates. Therefore, my view is that the election of Joe Biden in the USA was probably the final domino to topple, to see a significant shift in the world and moving towards kind of more of a greener play. With the historical US president-elect, there was where the US pulled out of the Paris Agreement. What is the Paris Agreement? It's where the 197 nations initially signed up on the 12th of December in 2015 to agree that substantially reducing the global greenhouse gas emissions and thus limiting carbon into the atmosphere, helping reduce global temperatures, is probably a good thing. And the ambition is that we see less than the 2-degree temperature change over this century. The USA pulled out of that agreement, but one of the first acts that Joe Biden did when he came and was elected was to sign America back into it. And because it is such a major power, you're by definition going to see a big push and a big catch up, I think, from the Americas, which in turn will propel the rest of the world. I guess, when you look at the globe and its political infrastructure, you tend to find that an awful lot of the Asian countries react and respond far quicker to a shift, just because of the political infrastructure or how they're made up, far more dictatorial than perhaps democratic, whereas the West tends to lag behind maybe on propelling at the same pace. So it will be interesting to see. It's an inevitability, I think, that we will start to see more and more regulation appear around sustainability. We'll start to see more and more demands made on global corporates and general corporates in reporting sustainability. It's the way that that we can start to drive that onus around the topic. What do you think, Steve, on that sort of basis?
Yeah, I'd agree, Matt. Everybody's talking about sustainability, although you've got to be careful with it. But it has certainly grabbed the social conscience over recent years, with companies, organisations, governments and end users keen to promote their greener lifestyle and reduce the harmful effects on our day-to-day lives and the planet. Therefore, reuse, refurbishment, the right to repair and environmentally conscious recycling have come to prominence. And more are used as a differentiator by many organisations looking to stay ahead of the pack. If you look at a lot of the large corporates and OEMs, they have their own sustainability and ethics committees today. They demand that our organisation is doing the right thing by being as green as possible. That means for our market in ITAR, it's no longer just about the value of what they can receive for that equipment. They want to know about the security around how the data is managed, because the risk to their brand if it leaks out. And they're going to want to know where those legacy units will ultimately end up, which is where certain accreditations like R2 responsible recycling comes into play by mapping the downstream of that material to its final disposition. So it's incredibly important, not only for us as a market and planet and everyone else, but it's driving itself. And it's important that organisations like Procurri and TES and probably most people on this call and ASCDI and others are fully aware of what's going on and buying into this whole market shift. It is very much a movement.
Yeah, and I think probably what's great is the fact that you've got the ASCDI stepping in into a forum and driving an entire summit around ITAR sustainability. A large part of what we need to do, I guess, at the moment is promote sustainability, promote green options, and put awareness on the table. And it's something that, to a large degree, the youth of the world have been, front and center at driving, and bravo to them on it. So I guess in relation to ITAD, I guess, what do we believe that means? What do we think it consists of, ITAD? And what we want to do is probably then explore some of the considerations if you are looking as an organisation to enter the ITAD world. So some of it will be then to walk you through TES and Procurri's journey, where we've got to from very different ends of the spectrum. Procurri coming from a hardware resale and discovering and realizing that we needed an end of life solution for stuff that we were selling that we were looking to maintain throughout it, and without putting words into Steve's mouth, or the TES brand, but very much from a waste management kind of perspective, I think, Steve. Yes.
Yeah, very much. Our heritage is as a recycling organisation, so we're coming up the stack to meet the likes of Procurri and others, whereas you guys are often moving down the stack. So yeah, it could be a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah, meets in the middle.
Hey, Matt, just a question. You mentioned all these countries that are signatories of the Paris Agreement, which includes a lot of Asian companies. Yet I don't see a lot of ITADs springing up in Asia, and with Procurri, being an Asian-based company. Am I wrong with that in that assumption?
I think so. I mean, there's a good volume of ITAD players over in the APAC region. Certainly, TES has a strong presence out there. Procurri has a half decent presence out there, and there are many others that we would cite as processing plants, facilities. I think it's probably fair to say that from predominantly what is a US and European audience, that we're obviously far more akin to the US type OEMs, the US manufacturers, so your HPs, your IBMs of this world, and that tends to come from in America, where they have a stronghold, bleeds over into Europe very, very neatly, and Asia, because it's so much more disparate as a continent as a whole, I guess. We were analysing it the other week, and you start up in Japan and you kind of conclude in Australia. That is a huge landmass that you are covering. in order to absorb all of those high-level, high-functioning nodes throughout APAC, and that does come with its own logistical challenges and language barriers to have a genuine solution spanning all of those. Just coming back to ITAR very quickly. I mean, there's 3 core elements I think that you can see or you believe that make up the ITAR play, and I think probably in order of importance, not necessarily that these will always be agreed, but in order of importance, I think you would probably say that the first and foremost piece is risk management. So this is about how an organization can confirm that the data that is retained on those assets is securely removed, and there are processes and things that we will then elaborate on in a minute to walk that through. And we saw an awful lot around risk management and data management, more importantly, I guess, with things like the introduction of GDPR legislation, certainly within Europe, and I think the US in turn is starting to see its own legislation start to impact. And that is all based around, I remember doing a talk with you, Joe, crikey, it's probably 5 years ago, but I bet in reality it was 7. But it was, nothing ages you, eh? Like time. So, at the time we were talking about this, the whole new initiatives, the new drive around, it's important that organizations take responsibility for the data that they hold, especially when it's private data of the public. And that comes down to then, how's it held, how's it stored, how's it managed when it's in use, is it used for the purposes it was collated for? Now, when it comes to the end of its useful life, it's obviously still on those disks and it needs to be removed in a precise and managed way, and that then extends down to a whole process roadmap in which you manage those assets, make sure nothing disappears during transit. I think then we move into the environmental risk. This is something we're now seeing appear in the market now. This is another drive around where it's going to bump ITAR and put it up the chain as far as its importance on the IT calendar. So environmental is all coming. How do we account for that carbon? Is there is there merit or is there a value in carbon offset based against some of those assets? So how do you ensure that it's going where it should go? It isn't going out of region. It isn't getting dumped in a river in Africa or something like this. And then the final consideration is it should be then the value return element. I guess, it's so often probably value is put at the top of that stack. I would argue, and I'm sure others would argue, that it's fine having value at the top of that stack, but the cost associated with a breach in either your security or environmental credentials will far outweigh any genuine value or extra $50 you might receive for a package or a piece of IT hardware. But of course, everybody has their own agenda on these things.
What do you think? You mentioned the Paris Accord. There was a comment in the chat about it not being effective because of different countries being handled differently. I have my own thoughts, but let me throw it at you guys first. What do you think? Is the Paris Accord the be all and end all?
Steve, go on. You go first.
I'm not sure it's the be all and end all, Joe, but it certainly. It's a good foundation to kick on where we need to be. It's people like every one of us that will actually make the difference going forward. If we leave it all up to the governments to make the decisions, we'll be here forever and a day. So, I think the way the market is going, with legislation backing up, the way the market is going, and like I say, the social conscience that has been grabbed, even down to an individual level, that's going to really change. You can see with individuals pressing certain buttons of politicians that things change very, very quickly. Yeah. But there is that sea change is happening now. Like I said before, if you look at a lot of the larger contracts that we're involved with, the RFQs, RFPs, all they talk about is the security and the sustainability piece. The value, and I get it that we're all in business, to make a dollar, but the value is way down the list. It is all about those two major elements, security of their data, and then the environmental piece on the back end. And that, like I say, that's moving apace, Joe. And even all the way to the retail end of the market. They're now promoting, second user products, with their badge on the front. They're selling these with a warranty, at a very good standard. And kids today are buying those more and more as opposed to new. And of course, it's the kids and that youth movement almost that is making the most noise at the moment. Yeah. So it's moving by itself, really, Joe, in answer to your question.
I would have answered my own question exactly the same way, Steve. I think the Paris Accord is a good starting point. I think it's going to be society. Our industry has always been a self-regulated industry. Back when the ASCI was founded many years ago, our code of ethics, we created this code of ethics to create a method in which people can do business with each other and not worried about getting taken advantage of. So we've been and that's what's happening, I think, again, with data and the environments. I think our industry is starting to adopt it. Paris Accord, not Paris Accord, it's going to happen, I believe.
I think the Paris Agreement is an ambition that we all have to hope or believe that can work, right? It's we can't afford, anyone that's got children, anyone who has an ambition to have children, it's what state you're going to retire this world to them in. And so I think by definition, there is hope, and the more it's pushed up on the agenda of organizations, it's got to be a good thing. And I think it's not about the few doing a lot, it's about everybody doing a little. And that's where you kind of get this global benefit, hopefully, from as we start to drive down that road. I mean, I've got a prediction that for you, Joe, that in the next 10 years, is it feasible that we would see very similar to how ingredients and nutritional and, more importantly, calorific information is forced to be displayed on the back of a packet of food? Because the belief is, I guess, that for the most part, as human beings, we try to make the right choices if we're provided the information. And so is it plausible that we would see over the next 10 years maybe legislation moving where the carbon footprint calorific information is forced to be displayed on all electrical devices? Is that something where if it was displayed, as people, we would start to make informed decisions about buying the ones with the lower calorie option rather than the higher calorie option if the net effect or the perception was there was no material difference in what it delivered? I can see this type of thing starting to bleed out into society over the coming years, especially as the world heads towards some of these major goals that are being committed to for 2025 and is it 2030 or 2040? But there's an awful lot of commitment around organizations to substantially reduce carbon footprint by that time.
Well, I'm not going to bet against your prediction, because 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I guess it was, when you predicted that the weed directive was going to, work, I would have bet against you. I'm not going to do that again, Matt. So I'm going to kind of.
This is it.
Yeah, you're right. Let's switch gears a little bit. What's it take to become an ITAD? Matt,
Steve, go on.
Steve,
give it a run.
Well, anybody can be an ITAD. It depends on the level of ITAD you want to be, I guess, Joe. A company taking back equipment, wiping the data, a fluff and buff refurbishment type thing on that product and resale is common across the market. I'm sure there's many people on the call today, Joe, who do exactly the same thing. And you can make a good business out of that. If you want to push the sustainability message, if you want to be scaling that business, you have to do a bit more. We've talked about the data sanitization piece, and then on the back end, the recycling piece or responsible recycling piece. And those things are heavily regulated, and certainly in Europe, where we're probably over-regulated, if anything. Moving products around Europe becomes increasingly difficult, and certainly on the waste side of it, which I'll talk to probably on the next slide. But becoming an ITAD is fairly straightforward. It is a good market. It is a market where it is moving apace, like we say, in terms of how people approach used products. So it is a good business to be in. It comes with the difficulty comes with the scalability of it, and therefore the credibility that if you want to scale that business, you have to focus on the permits, the accreditations necessary to allow you to undertake that business correctly. And what I mean by that, Joe, is, you know, if you say you're into sustainability and you do all the right things and you don't, it'll be a short-term business that you'll be in. Mm-hmm. You know, when your customer finds out that you're not managing that waste correctly, that contract will soon go. The reputational damage will be huge, and the business will be over. So you have to do what you're going to say, which is expensive and complex and heavily audited. But it is still.
I got to interrupt you, Steve. I'm chuckling because do as you say. That's our code of ethics. I mean, exactly. So if you're an ITAD ASCDI member and you dump it in a landfill when you're supposed to be, you know, disposing of it properly, you won't be an ASCDI member for long. You'll come afoul of our ethics process. It's do as you say. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I think the it's important to understand what you're getting yourself into. If you elect to become an ITAD, it's more than just sticking the badge on the front of the door and saying we're going to go and buy back your old gear. You know, the world has moved on, and there are, you know, legal obligations that you almost by default take on if you choose to enter this marketplace. So just be aware of what those are, and considerations that you should make as an organization are, you know, even down to benign things. You know, how do you manage the chain of custody? How do you ensure that the assets that the client is saying you're going to collect from their site actually arrive at your site for erasure, if that's where you're going to do it? So it's ensuring you have the handshake documentation that, you know, what leave site you receipt on. How are you going to collect and return those assets? You know, it should be in a rigid-sided, non-livery, GPS tracked vehicle, preferably with a no stops return policy, because it minimizes the chance of the thing getting, you know, broken into, assets being stolen. You need to ensure you've got a suitable erasure solution that is recognized and has the correct certifications for the, you know, the region in which you're erasing that data. You know, you need to make sure as well that, you know, the type of product that you're collecting, you have the technical capability to engineer and extract that data on it. You know, we've always said, you know, where Procurri kind of steps in with a lot of enterprise play. You know, it's one thing erasing laptops on a switch that naturally give up data. You stick in your Blanco key stick, you erase them through. Try repeating that process on a high-end Hitachi disk array system, which operates in a very, very different way. You can't even access the actual system itself to get the drives to spin to then actually effect an erasure over them. So it's those technical kind of considerations and requirements. And then I guess finally, you know, once you have erased it all, what happens, or what's the downstream solution for product that it no longer has any resale value, is damaged, is broken, it doesn't work? You know, so it's all these kind of processes and these checks and balances that, you know, if you're looking to enter the ITAB market, give it due consideration so you don't come unstuck. It's a positive place to be. It's a very green, you know, sustainable, all these great words that appear from it, but it's just making sure you do your checks and balances and you put the right processes in, the right flow, so that you don't come unstuck further down the line. And I guess what we have listed, the accreditations that will help you on that journey, I guess are where they are, and this is a smattering of ones that organizations may wish to consider if they want to jump down that ITAB play. Yeah,
and ASCDI has been researching this for several years now. So if any of you who are listening today are interested in taking a deeper dive into it, let me know, and I can get you, put you in contact with some of these different certifying bodies. We're getting close to the end, but I want to talk about Basel real quickly. Steve, please. Todd had mentioned it earlier today about the Basel Convention and what's, but if you can kind of drill down on that, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, will do. Just briefly, so the Basel Convention rules are transboundary permits that came into force in 1992. What it does, it applies a PIC procedure, which is a prior informed consent procedure, to regulate those transboundary movements of hazardous and non-hazardous waste, obviously including WEEE. Now, since 1992, if you're going to move product anywhere, you have to go through these Basel Convention rules. And if you're shipping product from point A to point B, but it calls in at 3 or 4 other places on the way on that shipment, you have to have an agreement with all of those countries. So it's incredibly complex to ship product around, and it should be. You know, the basis for the convention was to stop illegal waste shipments, you know, into Africa and other areas that are then dumped. The reason we want to talk about it today, and thanks to Joe to raise this point, is there is an amendment to the Basel Convention that probably affects or will affect most people, you know, on this call and members of ASCDI. So there's a proposal amendment from Switzerland and Ghana that was well-intentioned and seeking to you know, apply all the correct procedures, but also to include used electronic equipment. So as well as it's UE, which of course is equipment that we all see today, you know, we all trade today, and it would jeopardize legitimate ITAR refurbishment and repair operations, while actually doing little to stop the illegal flow of waste. So Switzerland and Ghana have presented this solution. They presented it in September 2020. Basel, although they heard it, they didn't take on these recommendations. There was work still needed to be done, and Ghana and Switzerland have gone away to look into improvements around waste and non-waste classifications and improving or smoothing the PIC procedure. Now, it was due to be heard again at Basel this summer, but it's been delayed due to the pandemic. Probably one of the good things that has come out of the pandemic. But it will be heard next summer in July 2022. So if this amendment does come in, it will affect us all, because used equipment will have to go through this bureaucratic procedure, which will add additional cost and delay to those shipments and affect that business. So along with TES, there are many other companies lobbying Basel today, and our local environment agencies and governments to have that proposal amendment thrown out. And I've discussed this with Joe, and that's why we wanted to raise that today to everybody on the call, because we'd ask you all to do the same, because it will affect us all ultimately. And it actually goes against what we're trying to do, the sustainability messaging. And it works against the circular economy outcomes that we're all looking for. So we do see it as a potential banana skin on the horizon.
Well, the good news is, I guess they postponed it for about a year.
Yeah.
So that gives us a little running room. But you know, for you folks who are still on the call, we're going to follow this up with a copy of these presentations and a copy of the videos. Steve, if you have any information or anything you can give us to help be proactive, who to contact, what the message should be, and it doesn't have to be this week, next week, but as soon as you have it, let us know. We'll get it out to everybody who's been on this call, as well as all the ASCDI members, to see what we can do to support the proper outcome of that amendment.
Yeah, I do already have a pack, Joe, because we've sent it to all of our TES organisations around the world.
Okay.
Each of them are badgering their local environment agencies and governments to try and stop this change. So I'll just sanitize it, make sure there's no company confidential information on that, and then I'll send it over to you, Joe.
That's great. And is my understanding correct? The Basel Convention is not just EU; it's worldwide. So
it's worldwide, yeah.
Right. So anybody in the world can weigh in on this.
Yeah. So if you are an ITAR buying product in America, Europe, or Asia and shipping it into your organisation today, if Ghana and Switzerland are successful, you'll have to go through these Basel Convention PIC procedures, which will delay the whole thing, is overly bureaucratic and costly. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just that it means it becomes a lot more difficult.
Great. All right. We're right on time for our next session. Closing comments, Matt. Anything you want to say? Words of wisdom?
There are a few words of wisdom from my mouth, Joe. But as I say, look, I mean, it's about everybody doing a little bit. Would be the takeaway from it. Be mindful of what you're getting into. There are numerous organisations that you can engage. TES being one, Procurri being another, depending on what types of product, or if you're looking to enter into the ITAD arena, where you can back off some of those responsibilities and those risks too. But fundamentally, as I say, it's all about driving awareness, providing comfort that there are options and what those options might look like to both clients and the members, I guess, on this one.
Great. Hey, folks, our next session is going to be on data wiping. We're going to meet back here in just a minute or so. Guys, Stephen, Matt, thank you. We're going to kind of throw you off the stage, and we're going to bring on the data erasure guys. Thank you, guys. Fascinating.
Cheers, Joe. Thanks, everybody. Take care.